Welcome back to a look about computers. You'll probably notice that I've got my coffee out of the way at this stage, and that's because we're going to look at a number of pieces of hardware. Now, this is a typical computer, and this is what we call a Midi Tower, because it's in a tower formation, and it's not as big as the big towers. But inside here lives the computer. And there's various bits and pieces, front and back, that we're going to take a look at. At the front you'll see that the computer has presented things that you're going to use, like the CD-ROMs, and also you'll find under some flaps you'll find things like front USB ports or microphone sockets, things that you're likely to use on a more common basis, and it's designed to save you from having to go around the back. Now at the back you'll find loads of connectors, and these connectors can vary quite widely, but the thing to notice is that I'm just going to hopefully get you a better view of this, while probably breaking my arms in the process, is that actually it's not easy to get things in the wrong holes, because a lot of these holes are pretty specific. Now you'll notice the power socket there. It's worth having a look at the back of these machines and taking a peek. Now here you'll notice the blue socket with the 3 rows of pins as opposed to another socket with 2 rows of pins. Those are different sockets. One of them is for the video, and this video card you'll see has got both the blue and the white, so it can work with both new and older monitors. The other thing you'll notice are these flat ones here, and these are the USB ports. There's plenty of them because a lot of devices are coming as USB. You'll typically notice that the keyboard and the mouse that I showed you were both USB, and there's also, if you had a printer, that would usually be USB, a scanner would be USB. Most of the devices these days are USB. These are actually the old connectors for older type keyboards and mice, and note that these are color coded as well, purple for the keyboard, green for the mouse. On top of that you have the audio connectors. Now again, these are color coded, and you'll see the green for the loudspeaker and the pink for the microphone. Also blue is for line out, line in, which is sort of reverse of the loudspeaker. But that's a bit more specialist, and the average user isn't likely to use those. You'll also spot what is a network connection, and that is what connects you to your ADSL modem. You'll also see here some of the older modem connections before ADSL was around. So typically, if you have a look at the back, you'll notice that most of the connectors are actually either specific or they're color coded, so it's not that difficult to wire up the back of a computer if you decide to move it. If you are a bit shy and you have a look at the back and you want to move a machine, take a picture of it before you move it. Most mobile phones have cameras these days, so take a picture of it, and that should be a reference point when you come to connect it back at the other side. Now a lot of this is common, and this is a bit bigger than your average unit, I will admit, and a bit heavier as well. The average desktop is actually configured sideways, so it goes down sideways. You typically have the monitor on top of it, keyboard in front of it, that sort of thing, and it is a bit smaller than this one, I have to admit. But computers come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Now I'm going to go bigger first, because a smaller is going to be a more difficult one to explain. The smaller one is the one that's got the more options. Says I putting this down without getting it on my foot. Now this beast is what we call a full tower. Wow, this is big. Now you can see at the front that it is quite tall. If we just open it up, I'll try to, I think it's locked. There's lots and lots of space in here for various devices. So if you've got, I think we've got 3 slots for large devices, 2 slots for smaller devices, and there are loads of internal slots. And I'm just going to open this up for you. Put that down. What I do is put this on the side. Now the use of bigger machines like this is if you're doing a lot of storage. Right, just going to unscrew this. Sometimes the bigger ones make things easier, and you can pretty much see the layout of the larger ones. The power supply would go up here, for example. You can see that this flap contains 2 fans. Actually, this whole system contains 7 fans. You can see here we've got the bays for things like CD-ROM drives, DVD-ROM drives that we can use at the front, floppy disk drives again that we can access from the front, and this can actually hold 6 hard disk drives. They can hold a lot of hard drives for storage. Something like this would typically be used for a server, where you've got where you need redundant storage. That is, storage that can cope if there's a failure. Now, we're probably going to come into that in a way later video, but this is the kind of thing that this would be used for. The computer itself would sit in there, that is the motherboard and all the various bits and pieces, and you'll probably notice that at the back there's a hole. Now, this hole allows for a plate to be fitted, because it's a way of getting around the differences of the motherboards. You can fit a plate in here that will fit the connections on the back of the motherboard. So it's very economical. You can actually reuse this case time and time again, even though it is a bit on the big side. Now, you can probably see there's 2 fans there blowing air across the hard disks. There's another 2 fans here taking air out. There's another fan here taking air up and out, and there's another 2 fans here that drag air in from the sides. So this pretty much is one of the big behemoths, a full tower as it's known, and it has its own uses. Not for most home users probably won't find themselves needing one of these, but one of the key things I want to get over here is that cases like these can be reused. So if your computer has reached the end of its life, if you have a standard case like this, you can reuse it and buy new innards rather than buying a whole new computer. Right, let's get rid of this and show you one of the smaller ones. Oh, quite a difference, isn't it? This is an example of a smaller computer, and it can fit in my hand. You'll see at the back that it's got connections for power, the old style video, network, and it can probably take a mouse and keyboard, USB, and it's got a section for headphones. It's got nothing for microphone or anything of that kind of description. It's a small cut down computer that can basically fit in the size of your hand. It's got a small amount of memory inside. You'll notice also that there's no CD or DVD drive, but you can get them to fit in the USB port. You can get all the extra bits and pieces, and that's pretty much what's going on. You don't have to have a box as big as the ones that I've shown you. It all comes down to what I mentioned in that first video. What are you going to use the computer for? If you're not going to use it for powerful graphics processing or video processing, you don't need a large powerful computer. You can make do with something that's smaller, and when you go smaller, you've got more options. Computers of this type you will find built into monitors. In some cases, even the computer is built into the keyboard even. So that kind of technology can cut down on the number of wires. It can cut down on the number of boxes that you've got to look after. It's all down to you and what you want to use the computer for. The smaller computers in these days, which were only a couple of years old, have actually come on in leaps and bounds. You can do more with less space because they're getting smarter. So don't consider yourself having to walk into a shop and buy a traditional box, monitor, keyboard thing. You've got options, particularly if you've got older equipment that's left over from an older computer. So long as you can literally connect it to your newer computer, you're fine. You don't have to rebuy those things. That saves you having to mess around. You reuse things that you're used to, particularly if you've invested money in another keyboard or another mouse or a better monitor. you can reuse that investment and just get the computer. And there are a lot of different computers out there. Technology is coming on in leaps and bounds, and it pays to actually talk with someone who knows what they're talking about but hasn't got a vested interest. Like, get hold of a friend who knows about things. Or even if you can find a shop where, as opposed to the general box shifters like PC World, Dixon's, Curry's, that sort of thing, you might find in your locality a shop where there are people who haven't got such a vested interest. And those people are the ones who can give you options when it comes to buying a computer, because you haven't got to buy a complete system. You can investigate technologies like these, like smaller computers that are built into monitors even. There's a whole range of stuff out there, and you're not stuck with it. Those people can also build computers for you. They will be able to take your old case, buy parts and put them in there, and that will typically wind up as better value for money for you. And I'll explain why in the next video when we have a look at laptops.